In the second year of my marriage to Jason, I was kidnapped. The kidnappers only wanted money, and Jason had plenty of that. But he didn't answer the phone. Because his half-moonlight only had 6 months left, he took her to the Antarctic as promised. I was tortured for 3 months, battered and bruised, and the baby that had formed was lost. When he came back and saw the pregnancy test results in the drawer, he asked me with surprise, "Are you pregnant?" I responded calmly, "Not anymore." I was found in a stinking drain. The kidnappers thought they had killed me and casually threw me into the drain. It was a kind peasant woman who found me and took me in. 3 days later, I began to regain consciousness. The woman's eyes sparkled with joy. But my hands couldn't even lift the bowl of porridge she brought me. All my fingers were broken. At that moment, I sorrowed only for one thing: I could never play the piano again. I had lost the one skill that made Jason's heart flutter for me. Just then, the woman's phone received an entertainment news notification. The famous actress Lucy had finally recovered and returned to the country. The woman wanted to cheer me up, pushing the screen closer to me, exclaiming, "Look, be happy. The news says she recovered from illness. You can too." She looks so beautiful, and the man next to her is so caring. I followed the woman's gaze and saw Lucy's husband was none other than my own husband, Jason. I mustered a smile. Yes, a perfect match. And what about me? Unable to move, I would definitely be covered in ugly scars in the future. On my abdomen, a long scar from a chain whipping. "Jason, I didn't have time to tell you that we have a child. Lucy's life is worth much more than our child, right?" Suddenly, the rudimentary door was pushed open. A familiar voice, "Diana." I turned around to see Jack. He stood in the doorway of the humble house, like a beam of light. Jack, Jason's uncle, was the last person I expected to find me. Without hesitation, he lifted me into the car. Seeing the deep scars on my wrist, his fingers trembled slightly. "Don't be afraid, I'm here. I'll take you to the hospital." My nose stung, but tears wouldn't come. I had cried too much these months. Tears dried up. After an examination, the doctor seriously called for a consultation. My right arm and thighs each had 4 fractures, and my fingers were shattered. Due to delayed treatment, my weakened body couldn't undergo surgery immediately, and the recovery process would be very painful. Internal bleeding, severe uterine infection. Jack's voice was hoarse. He looked down at me, voice trembling. "What have you been through?" What have I been through? It was no less than hell. He took a deep breath, asking, "Jason doesn't know yet?" I shook my head. There was a hint of pity in Jack's eyes. Yes, my husband had no idea that his pregnant wife had been kidnapped for 3 months. He cut off all contact with the outside world just to accompany his first love. Such depth of love moved countless netizens, let alone me, who grew up with him. After arranging for a nurse, Jack left quietly. The next day, I gazed dully at the birds flying past the ward window. Maybe I should never have clung to Jason. A familiar voice interrupted my thoughts. "Diana, what are you doing here?" I turned to see Jason, his hand intimately supporting Lucy. 6 months had passed, and Lucy's complexion was rosy. The terminal illness she had once confided in Jason about had miraculously disappeared. Not only did she show no signs of illness, she seemed more radiant than before. When Jason saw my wheelchair, he furrowed his brows and asked, "What happened? Are you injured?" Before the nurse could speak, I stopped her and said, "No, just a minor operation, just a recovery period." Jason hurried over and crouched in front of me. I pulled my collar up, hands hidden inside my sleeves, covering the scars. Frowning, he asked, "What operation? Why didn't you tell me?" "Tell you? How could I tell you?" For those 3 months of being kidnapped, I had hoped every day for a call from the kidnappers to be answered by someone. Jason would bring the money and rescue me. But there was none, not a single call was answered. Whenever the kidnappers heard the mechanical voice message, they flew into a rage. The only way to vent their anger was on me, breaking one of my fingers every day and then pouring salt on it. At that time, for Jason's child in my womb, I knelt on the cold ground every day for hours, begging those scumbags for a half-moldy bun like a beggar. The kidnappers thought they would make a fortune by catching me, but they didn't expect me to be so useless. You are really worthless. After being missing with a baby in your belly for so long, your husband doesn't care. Are you a worthless woman? You're so cheap that not even you like yourself. Why would you want to give birth to a little piece of trash that no one likes, huh? If I were you, I'd have killed myself long ago. No, big brother, if she kills herself, what about our money? The kidnappers kicked the person next to them. Look at her, losing money every day and still eating ours. He grunted, forget it, let's just kill her. It's a waste of time. The sound of the iron rod hitting the flesh, the sound of the chain grinding, the thick smell of blood and rust filled my mouth. Although my vision was gradually fading, I keenly felt the baby leaving me. I had no strength left. Because my own life was slipping away. I couldn't do anything. In the state of near death, I thought, wouldn't it have been better if I had gone with my parents that day? Why didn't they take me with them? For all these years, I had lived in Jason's house but was subjected to daily humiliation by Jason's aunt. Because of that engagement, I became the most scheming and annoying person in her eyes. Jason interrupted my reminiscing, sounding slightly impatient. Diana, tell me the truth, what's wrong? I shook my head lightly, forced a smile. It's really nothing, you don't need to worry about me, just focus on Lucy. I'll go back to the ward though. Jason frowned, he seemed to have believed me. After all, those who didn't truly care wouldn't even bother to appease. I pushed the wheelchair, ready to return to the ward. Wait. Jason stopped me and said, hey. Spit it out. What am I afraid of now? The piano recital, the company decided to give it to Lucy first. Can you wait until next year? Without looking back, I softly said, okay. I can't hold another recital, can't play the piano anymore, I muttered as I went back to my room. Head down, looking at my hands, I remembered when my parents were alive. They always said that when I held a recital, they would sit in the front row and proudly tell everyone, this is my daughter, our precious little princess. Unfortunately, we can't go back in time. The phone rang, and I hesitated to see the caller ID. Mandalay Hospital, my regular checkup place. I picked up the phone, the doctor sounded annoyed. How long has it been since your last checkup? You haven't shown up once. Even if you don't care about yourself, can't you think about the baby? Do you know how difficult it is for you to carry this child? I'm sorry, my voice hoarse, tears welling up, I looked up and said, the child is gone. I'm sorry. After a long silence, the other person apologized. I couldn't hold back my tears any longer and started sobbing on the phone. After hanging up, I overheard the nurses discussing Jason and Lucy. They spoke with admiration and blessings about how lovers finally united. It's really worth celebrating. I foolishly joined them in smiling. A few months later, I was discharged, and Uncle Jason personally came to pick me up. Child, you've suffered. Why didn't you tell us when you were sick? Jason chuckled, she just likes to keep things to herself, dramatic. I could only force a smile and remain silent. Jason, did you hear me when I needed you the most? I was taken back to Jason's old house. I really didn't want to come back, but there were things that needed to be resolved here. The heavy wooden door of the living room creaked open, and Jason entered without offering me a hand. In an instant, my mind raced back to 3 months ago, in that dark, damp cellar. The narrow iron door, each time they came to torture me, they would play with me like a cat playing with a mouse, hitting the door with an iron rod. In the darkness, the sounds and fears were amplified infinitely. They heard my screams, laughing more wantonly and recklessly. The pain of that memory kept spreading in my mind until Jason's unexpectedly soft voice interrupted me. He gently said, "You're here." The tone was not directed at me. I lifted my head, and there was Aunt Jason pulling Lucy's hand, chattering about something. When they saw me return, she rolled her eyes and continued talking. Lucy immediately stood up, her face showing concern, but her eyes were full of smiles. She held my hand and said, "Diana, Jason is worried about me going abroad alone. It's not safe. He insisted on accompanying me, delaying your surgery. Are you mad at me?" Before I could respond, Jason jumped in. How could she be mad? Diana is very sensible. I chuckled to myself. How can a sensible person have the right to lose their temper? Suddenly, Jack, who had been sitting on the side, spoke up. His voice was cold. "Miss Lucy, now that you're well, you're talking too much." Lucy's face froze, but she didn't dare say anything. Holding the basic property of the Jason family, Jack naturally had the final say. Jason quickly changed the subject. "Diana, you can stay in the guest room on the 3rd floor. Your bedroom is currently Lucy's." He patiently explained, "Lucy has just recovered, and the doctor says she must stay okay." I didn't let him finish speaking. I just grabbed my small suitcase and headed to the guest room on the 3rd floor. Jason stood there watching me until I got on the elevator. He was still standing there. At night, I went to find Jack. "Uncle Jack, I want to divorce Jason." Although only 4 years older than me, Jack was now the head of the Jason family. It was most appropriate to speak with him. No one in the Jason family dared not listen to him. As long as he agreed, I could easily divorce Jason. Moreover, he didn't seem to like me very much, always distant with me. This time when I was kidnapped, I clearly gave the kidnappers Jack's phone number. But the kidnappers still didn't get the money. This showed that after receiving the call, Jack refused the kidnappers' demands. He was a qualified businessman. And I was of no value. But that worked in my favor this time. The engagement between Jason and me was arranged by our grandfathers. Since childhood I knew from a young age that I would marry Jason. In my freshman year of high school, my parents died in a car accident, and I was brought to the Jason family early. When Grandpa Jason was alive, everyone was nice to me. But the night after Grandpa Jason passed away, everything had changed. After all, he was the only one with personal ties to my family. With both parents gone and our family in decline, I was left with no support. After hearing my request, Jack nodded slowly. "Okay, I'll handle it." He agreed just like that. I truly had no value. Then he took out a stack of documents from a drawer. "These are the investments I made for you, using the money left by your parents." Oh. Over the years, Jack had been providing for my living expenses. No wonder he always told me not to feel indebted to the Jason family. My eyes welled up. "Thank you." As I left with the documents and card, I saw Jason standing at the door. "What did you say to my uncle?" I sighed, looked at him seriously, and said, "Jason, let's get a divorce." "What?" Jason was surprised that I had initiated the divorce. After all, he was the person I promised to marry since I was a child. That conviction never changed. Since the day I met him, I vowed to sit by his side. When he spilled hot milk on me, I didn't give up. When he pushed me away after confessing his feelings, causing me to fall down the stairs, I didn't give up. When he only had eyes for Lucy, I didn't give up. I had deeply loved him for so many years, enduring patiently, never wanting to let go even in death. Now, however, I was truly tired. After hearing his harsh words, I had no energy to argue back. "Jason, this is how you gradually pushed me away. Your room. Her concert." These words didn't bother him at all. We've been married for 2 years, but we still sleep in separate rooms. He has never acknowledged me as his wife. Rumors have it that he and the actress Lucy belong to the perfect match. While I am seen as a shameless third party, it's quite funny to think about. If the robber kidnapped Lucy instead, they wouldn't have trouble getting the money. Sorry, love has faded away. I had no intention of explaining to him. I just calmly stated my plan. I don't need any of the property division. I won't take anything from Jason's house. So all we need to do is get a divorce certificate, whenever you have time. But Jason suddenly exploded in anger. He grabbed my wrist tightly, his eyes sharp. "You are dreaming." His grip was so strong that I started coughing violently. Every bone in my body seemed to be fixed together with steel nails, and with that cough, I heard the sound of metal clashing. I tried to calm my breathing and stop coughing. When Jason saw me like that, he became flustered and picked me up, rushing towards the bedroom. I was in too much pain to resist. As we entered the bedroom, it was pitch black as the light was off. Fear started to take over my nerves, and every muscle in my body trembled. The feeling of iron rods hitting my stomach. Blood flowing down, stimulating my nerves like an electric shock. Before I could react, my body curled up, my hands clasped together in Jason's arms, and I begged in a desperate tone, "Please. Don't hit my stomach." Jason looked at me in shock. "What are you talking about?" My voice hoarse and trembling, "Hit me, don't hit my stomach." Jason gently laid me on the bed, and with a click, the light came on. He stroked my back gently, trying to calm me down. "Diana, what's wrong, Diana? Are you afraid of the dark?" The light stung my eyes, and I realized I was not in that stinking cellar anymore. I was locked in there, living there for 2 whole months. That smell, even though it had been so long, still lingered around me all the time. I was filthy, dirty, and had no dignity. "Are you hiding something from me?" Jason stared at me intently. After a while, I finally understood what he meant. On the table in the bedroom, there was a torn-up pregnancy test paper that I had shredded before, now pieced back together. His eyes were filled with hope. "Why didn't you tell me? Are we going to have a baby? You went to the hospital to protect the pregnancy, right?" "Diana, I admit, I wasn't good enough to you before. Now I understand. You did it for me, for our family. Can't I be good to you now? Don't be silly, don't divorce, for our child." I listened to Jason's confession, tears falling unknowingly. These words, I had waited for so long, why did they come so late? A frozen heart cannot be warmed again. Coldly, I said, "There is no baby." With just that sentence, Jason lost his patience in an instant. He sternly said, "Diana, what are you playing at?" I looked up and smiled, "Nothing. I've suffered, but I know you won't." Jason didn't know the child was gone, unable to hide his barely detectable joy in his eyes. It seemed he was genuinely happy about this child's arrival. I thought he would only like Lucy's child. He took a deep breath, hurriedly ran out, trying to cover up my indifference. When he came back, he had several pieces of baby clothes in his hands. Pink ones, blue ones, and a tiny gold and jade lock. I instantly teared up, not because of Jason's change, but because I was the most careless mother in the world. He had been with me for 3 months, and I only noticed his existence now. Fortunately, he didn't come into this world, didn't choose me as his mother. I would definitely not take care of him well. Jason placed the baby clothes in my hands, small and soft. "Diana, trust me." I touched the tiny clothes, specially chosen so as not to scratch the baby's skin. In my room, there were many small toys, my first child, and I had no experience taking care of a child. I didn't know when he would play with those toys or when he would call me Mommy. Kept waiting, and I think I would give him all the love in the world. But suddenly, I slapped myself in the face. Jason was stunned. "What are you doing?" I slapped myself again. There seemed to be a lump in my throat that I couldn't swallow, and I couldn't cry. I just stared at the baby clothes blankly, slapping myself hard to numb the pain and sadness. "I'm not a good mother." Jason panicked, tossing the clothes aside, clasping my hands tightly. "Diana. I know you're mad at me. I won't, absolutely won't do it again." Jason sat next to me, hugging me, gently stroking my hair, comforting me continuously. "How can you trust me? I swear, I promise, I'll kneel down for you, can I?" "It's too late." I pushed him away gently, looking into his eyes. "It's too late." "It's not too late." I stared straight into his eyes. "The child is already gone." Jason stammered, "What? You're talking nonsense. I just found out about this good news." Without waiting for him to finish, I asked in a grim voice, "Do you know how he died?" Jason looked at me in disbelief, shaking his head. I looked at Jason with a crazy look. Remember, he was torn out of me while still alive. Jason, when he fell out of my belly, was red, sticky, surrounding me, comforting me. He was the foul-smelling place, the only person who gave me warmth. "Oh, he's not even a person. He's tiny, hot, you didn't see how cute he is, I said, laughing, smiling and shedding tears at the same time. He looked at me, the corners of his mouth involuntarily twitching, as if trying to understand the meaning of what I was saying. Then, trembling, asked me with a shaky voice, "What nonsense are you talking? Did you have an abortion?" I didn't want to laugh, but his expression was just too funny, scared, shocked, incredulous. After knowing him for so many years, I had never seen so many expressions on his face at the same time. Wait, I saw it once. On the day Lucy was forcibly sent abroad by Aunt Jason, Jason's expression was much more varied. I pointed to the prenatal examination report in his hand and patiently explained, "Sorry, I tore off the date, this is the previous prenatal examination report." His hand trembled, it seemed like he understood my meaning. "Jason, I was kidnapped, did you know?" His eyes widened instantly. "What? Haven't my family told you that I haven't been home for 3 months?" He slowly shook his head. "No, no one told me." It must have been Aunt Jason's intention to do so. She was eager for conflict between Jason and me, then a divorce. Now, as she wished. It has already happened. Jason's face turned ugly, and as I was about to leave, he pulled me into his arms. I'm sorry. I always thought that as long as Jason turned around and looked at me, I could forgive him unconditionally for his indifference and alienation over the years. Even he didn't need to say sorry. But tonight, he said so many sorries to me, but my resentment towards him did not diminish at all. "You don't need to apologize, just divorce me, let me go, can you do that?" He looked at me, his eyes reddening. From his eyes, I saw myself smiling at the moment, such a fake smile, such a hypocritical smile. "No, Diana, I'm not getting a divorce, I want to compensate you well, give me a chance to compensate you, okay?" Look, such a smile can't deceive Jason. Then I don't need to smile anymore. I looked at him coldly. "What you call compensation, is it trapping me by your side regardless of my wishes?" "Not at all," I directly interrupted his sophistry. "Do you think that once we divorce, you will immediately change your mind and marry Lucy, so you refuse to let me go?" He looked incredulous. "How could that be? I just want to love you well." I coldly snorted, "Lie, if we get a divorce, can't you be good to me again? Who do you owe, me Diana, or your wife?" He blinked, not understanding my meaning. After a while, he firmly rejected my divorce proposal. "I can't divorce you, I know, once you leave here, you won't come back." I was locked in Jason's house, and he sent a few servants to watch me all the time. These days, Jason has always been sleeping on the floor in my room, looking like a good man. There was only one night when he didn't come back. But he had never asked about the details of the kidnapping case. So hypocritical. If he really wanted to be good to me, shouldn't he find the people who hurt me? I gently opened the door, taking only the contract and card that Jack gave me, and some documents, not even daring to wear shoes. The servants were already asleep. I quietly opened the door, the cold wind pouring straight into my neck. I didn't care about anything, I just ran. I ran until my throat hurt, my lungs hurt, my head hurt, but I dared to not stop. Until a beam of light shone on me, I was startled, and ran into the thicket next to me in a panic. I was scared. I didn't want to go back to Jason's house. I want to have my own life. That place has never been my home. "Diana, don't run, it's dangerous." I heard a familiar voice and stopped, turning stiffly. Jack was standing there. Seeing me stop, he cautiously ran over. "Don't be afraid, it's me." He bent over and picked me up. "Uncle Jack, why did you come back at this time?" He didn't say a word, but put me in the car and turned on the light to check my foot. It was then that I felt the pain. My foot was full of thorns. He took out a mineral water from the side and carefully cleaned my wounds, little by little, meticulously. After washing, he took out some medicine and applied it to my wounds patiently and carefully. I have never had such intimate contact with him, and I didn't dare to move. After doing all this, he stood up straight. "I heard from my assistant that you didn't leave Jason's house. I knew something must have happened." "Ah." He explained further, his voice softened. "I've been on a business trip these days, and you were locked in Jason's house. why didn't you tell me anything? I didn't know how to respond. For a moment. We are not close at all. Jack didn't press me, but drove the car all the way down the hill. He carried me into a residential area. I've had a house prepared here for you to stay in for now. Stay in his house? It seemed like he was afraid I would misunderstand, so he added, I don't live here. Oh. Because of the injuries on my body, I couldn't eat much. The aunt that Jack hired, although she was paid a high price, she left after a few days, saying that I was difficult to serve. Jack saw me sitting on the couch looking pitiful, brought over a few dishes, try what I cooked. Cooking and Jack really don't match, but the food he made was indeed good. Seeing me happy eating, he rubbed my hair. Should I come over and cook for you every day in the future? I nodded. I don't know why I agreed, but with him around, I felt much more at ease. The next morning, Jack rang the doorbell. He had been doing this for the past few days. Even though he knew the passcode, he still rang the doorbell, waiting for my permission to enter. Just as I opened the door, a furry thing squeezed in. I jumped in shock. It turned out to be Jack's German Shepherd. He made Pluto sit down, and then said, let it come in and accompany you, also give you something to do. I didn't understand what he meant. After eating my food, he should give me something to do, walk the dog. The evils of capitalism. Pluto was temporarily left at my house. I don't know if it was because of the increased exercise from walking the dog, or seeing such a big dog, proudly lying next to my bed, feeling very safe. That night, I slept very soundly. I didn't even hear Jack ringing the doorbell. When he shook me awake, both of us were startled. You scared me. I rang the doorbell several times with no answer, so I just came in. He rubbed my eyes. This was the first good sleep I had after coming back from hell. Pluto seemed to know it was thanks to him. He squeezed in between us, his eyes shining brightly and looking cute. After making dinner, Jack planned to leave. Almost unconsciously, I grabbed his sleeve as he was leaving. He looked at me puzzled. Coughing a few times, I had to say it. How about you stay over here? He seemed a bit stunned. What did you just say? I cleared my throat and repeated, stay here, it's tiring running back and forth every day. Jack didn't immediately agree, he just said it wasn't the right time. My face felt hot. I quickly let go of his sleeve and ran into the bedroom. At night, when Jack came over, I purposely delayed opening the door a little bit. But he wasn't mad either. He took out a document from his bag and handed it to me. It said divorce agreement. I went to cook while he told me, take a careful look at it while I prepare food. Without much thought, I sat on the sofa and started reading. The agreement stated that after the divorce, I would receive 30% of the shares of Jason Corporation, basically half of Jason's shares. Any deposits and real estate under Jason's name acquired during the marriage would be split equally. This definitely wasn't Jason's intention, primarily because Aunt Jason wouldn't agree. Jason is a filial son, he wouldn't go against his mother. How could Aunt Jason have easily let Lucy go back then? Jason didn't say a word of protest. I looked towards the kitchen, took the agreement and went in. He glanced at me saying, this is the first draft, let me know if there's anything missing that needs to be compensated, I'll have my lawyer add it. My nose tingled, is this what you really want? He pursed his lips, smirked slightly, and shook his head. It wasn't? Could it be that Jason had really had a change of heart? Who would have thought? He then said, this is what the marriage law states. The law allows you to take the money, so why not? At that moment, I just wanted to leave Jason's house. I was afraid that if I made demands, the divorce process would become very lengthy. I didn't want to wait, I just wanted to quickly get rid of Jason. Don't worry, I am here for you. I nodded without saying another word. The next day, I was ready to register for the divorce. Jack wanted to come along, but his identity wasn't suitable for being there. But obviously, some people just didn't understand this concept. Lucy looked at me triumphantly as we lined up to get the divorce certificate. Diana, are you really getting divorced from me? Did you lie when you said you would forgive me no matter what I did? Jason asked me with a painful look on his face. How dare he ask me such a question? Are you worthy of my forgiveness? He was speechless for a moment. Finally, it was our turn to sign, and suddenly Jason said, "Diana, you're right, even if we divorce, I can still treat you well. I want to pursue you again." My heart skipped a beat. I kept my head down, hiding my cold smile. At that moment, the prodigal returns was worthless in my eyes. I quickly signed. When I received the divorce certificate, I felt much lighter in both body and mind. As we walked out, Lucy approached. "Is it really a divorce?" "Diana, you'll regret missing such a good man like Jason." I looked at her and lightly laughed. "Looks like you're regretting it a lot, chasing after him to be the other woman." "Diana," Jason called out to me, "don't be so harsh. Lucy never crossed the line." "Jason, do you really know what boundaries are?" With that retort, I walked away without looking back. At that moment, even cursing them felt dirty on my lips. At night, Jack moved in. Finally, I gathered the courage to ask him, "Why did you hang up on the kidnappers when they called you that time?" Jack was clueless. What call? Did Jack not know? But I clearly remembered, the kidnappers had called all the numbers in my contacts, and all of them were disconnected after hearing the amount. Without exception, Jack was once my only hope besides Jason, but when I heard the kidnappers say those words, I realized I had been abandoned by the world. Just as the kidnappers said, I was an extreme failure. But Jack said he never received a call. His eyebrows furrowed. "Mistress said that because Jason was with Lucy abroad, you were upset and left, but I thought you wouldn't leave without reason for so long. You still had to prepare for the piano competition, that's why I started looking for you." He held my hand. "I'm sorry, I noticed it too late." As I looked into Jack's eyes, they were clean and sincere, not deceiving me. What is going on? Only by finding those kidnappers could I understand it. After that day, my life became peaceful and fulfilling. Every day walking the dog, attending foreign language classes, and then waiting for Jack to come home and eat together. With this divorce property, I finally had the confidence to investigate that kidnapping. Jack said he had been investigating too and had some leads. That day, as I packed my things ready to pick Jack up from work, an annoying face suddenly appeared in front of me as I opened the door. Lucy, a big star who ran around everywhere and still managed not to be photographed. I really admire her. "Diana, are you doing okay?" "Very well." She wanted to come in, but stopped when she saw Pluto. "I'm here to tell you to move out soon, Jason has found this place." I sarcastically looked at her. "I thought you were already Mrs. Jason, but you're still stuck running in circles here." She looked at me, angrily glaring with a beautiful mask now torn by her furious expression. "What do you know? Jason will marry me soon, and besides, with Aunt Jason's support, Jason will definitely marry me." Nodded. "Jane couldn't stand me. What makes you think he'll like you? Do you think you're any different from when you were sent away?" She stretched out her hand, revealing a sapphire ring. "I understand now, you're a celebrity. Do you think Jason's family needs you to make that meager money from acting? Even Jason's family, not to mention me with only 3% of shares, doesn't care. You." She took 2 steps closer to me, but when Pluto started barking wildly at her, she backed off. I thought the verbal warfare would end there, but then she suddenly chuckled lowly, her eyes filled with hatred. "Diana, do you think you're so righteous? Do you enjoy eating stale bread? Eating, drinking, and using the restroom all in one space, how does it feel?" I felt like I was frozen in place. Those memories I thought I had gradually forgotten, flooded back into my mind. "I haven't forgotten, those fears are even clearer now. Diana, you deserve to lose a child. It's all your fault. You deserved the most to die, yet you lived." How did she know all this? What I went through, I never told anyone except the police and Jack. Not only does she know, but she knows it in such detail. Why? Were those people, she hired them? That's the only possibility. No wonder Jack said he never received a call from the kidnappers. They never called at all, it was just a facade. They watched me go from hope to despair like it was a game. No one received a call, no one received my cries for help. I rushed over uncontrollably, reaching out to grab Lucy by her collar. Instead, she smirked and fell backward off the stairs. She screamed, "Diana!" Jason came down the elevator and saw Lucy pushed down the stairs by me. He walked over, pushed me aside, and picked up Lucy. Lucy hid in Jason's arms, smirking at me triumphantly. I was trembling all over. Because of Jason, she killed my child and made me suffer inhuman torment for 3 whole months. How could she treat me like this? Jason scolded me, looking disappointed. "Diana, you've greatly disappointed me." Before I could speak, a warm hand was placed around my waist. Jack stood by my side, looking down contemptuously at the two on the ground. "Do you think she cares about your opinion of her?" Jason had a deep-seated fear of Jack, but when he saw the hand around my waist, he suddenly became furious. You live together?" I held onto Jack's arm. "Does it matter to you?" Jason suddenly laughed. "So that's how it is. No wonder you suddenly want a divorce from me. You found someone better." I nodded. "He's indeed better than you in every way." Lucy tugged at Jason's collar. "Jason, it hurts." Jason didn't say anything and carried Lucy away. After they left, Jack approached me suddenly. "Do you really think that? That I'm better than him in every way?" He bent down and looked me in the eyes. "Am I better than him?" I nodded firmly. "Of course, you're more handsome, more capable, and you love me more." He suddenly kissed me, silencing my words. The room fell silent. Even Pluto wisely went to the balcony. His kiss left me breathless, my head spinning, and as he carried me to the bed, reality set in. "Are you sure about this?" he whispered, kissing my earlobe gently. "Have you decided?" I woke up the next morning, and Jack was already making breakfast. I quietly walked over, hugging his waist. "Awake?" After breakfast, Jack received a phone call, his expression turning serious. From his eyes, I could tell it was about me. Before he could say anything, a friend had already informed me. Lucy used a burner phone to tell everyone that I pushed her from the balcony, unintentionally revealing my current address. With the access card, the reporters swarmed downstairs. I peeked through the window curtain and indeed, there were many reporters outside. Online, the insults against me were overwhelming. "Just an ex-wife, what right does she have to hit someone? If it weren't for her interference, Lucy would have been Mrs. Jason a long time ago. Hug Lucy, dealing with such a lunatic." Jack called the building management to remove the reporters. Eventually, the police were called, and the paparazzi were only expelled after that. "Don't be afraid, I'm here." I didn't want to keep avoiding everything, so I told Jack directly that Lucy might be the one who kidnapped me. He wasn't surprised at all. It seemed he already found out. "Look at this." He showed me some photos, one of a middle-aged man who turned out to be Lucy's uncle. She grew up in her uncle's house. Another was her cousin who was recently released from jail after serving time for robbery. But the following photos made me uncontrollably afraid. These 4 men, I knew them too well. I don't think I could ever forget their faces in my lifetime. They were the ones who kidnapped me. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure." By the 3rd day of the escalating public criticism, the police issued a notice that Lucy was suspected of kidnapping and extortion and had been arrested. I didn't need to say anything. There were people explaining to netizens what kidnapping was, who was kidnapped, and what the victim lost after being kidnapped. Unusually, I saw Jason downstairs. As soon as he saw me, he walked over quickly, looking like he was about to cry. "Diana, I'm sorry. I didn't know what you've been through." I turned my gaze away, not wanting to look at him. "Except for that child, the suffering I endured has nothing to do with you." His face went pale instantly, but I felt a sense of sadistic pleasure. "Do you know?" I looked carefully at him, not wanting to miss any of his expressions, and continued. "When that child died, he was already 3 months old, just a little more, just a little bit more, and he could have survived." Jason swayed and took a few steps back, leaning against a nearby tree to steady himself. "If that child knew, when he died, his biological father was with his ex-girlfriend watching the aurora, he must have hated you so much, right?" Jason closed his eyes, unable to listen any further. I have no good place on me, not even to be tortured like this, right? And all of this, it's all because of you, Jason. You're fickle, since you love Lucy, you shouldn't have married me. Clearly, I had already proposed to dissolve the engagement, and Uncle Jason had agreed. Clearly, I was ready to leave Jason's family, but he took advantage of me while I was unconscious with a high fever. Afterwards, he pretended to take responsibility for me, saying he would forget Lucy and treat me well for a lifetime, but after we got married, everything changed. He said I was just a tool for him to revenge against his father. Jason, you've ruined my life, now you want me to forgive you, let me tell you, unless you go die. People die every day in this world, why hasn't Jason gone to die? Jason suddenly raised his head, blood flowing from his nose. But he didn't seem surprised by it, skillfully taking out cotton balls to stop the bleeding. I didn't have time to waste here, so I took Pluto upstairs. Jack came back in the evening, looking very serious. What's wrong? He held my hand and pulled me into his arms. I found out who's the mastermind behind your kidnapping. Who? Jane. He said, the one who kidnapped me is Jason's mother. I want to hear your opinion. I sat up and looked at him. Are you trying to persuade me not to sue her? Jack stared at me, then suddenly smiled and pinched my nose. Is this how you look at me? I quickly shook my head. No, I mean, if she's sued, will it affect the company? He looked at me helplessly and amusedly. It's already this late, and you're still thinking about the company? I bit my lip, mumbled and argued. After all, I have shares now. Jack chuckled and then became serious. I'm afraid my brother's kindness to you will shake you. My assistant is downstairs now. As long as you say pursue it, he'll take us to the police station immediately. I thought for a moment. Uncle Jason has been very good to me, but I can compensate him in other ways, rather than make myself suffer and regret. I want to call the police. I want her to pay the price. All right. Jane was arrested in the middle of the night, and the kidnappers, including Lucy's uncle and cousin, were all caught 2 days later. Jane kept cursing me, calling me ungrateful, but who cares, I just wish she'd die. I thought Uncle Jason would try to persuade me, but I didn't expect him to support my decision. However, there was a shocking news that came to me. Jason was hospitalized, and his illness was very serious. Several months later, the whole story of the case was finally clear. Jane was sentenced to life in prison. Lucy was sentenced to 15 years and all her property confiscated. Because of her crimes, the TV series she starred in could not be aired normally. The production side demanded compensation, including her endorsements, were also being held accountable. Even if she gets out of prison in the future, she'll have to work her whole life to pay off her debts. As for the 4 people who kidnapped me, they were sentenced to life, 15 years, 13 years, and 10 years respectively. Lucy's uncle was sentenced to 5 years, and her cousin, who was still on probation, was sentenced to 10 years directly. When I went to see Jason, he was already so sick, but instead of seeking treatment at the hospital, he went back home. It finally dawned on me. He was so happy when he found out I was pregnant because he had known about his illness for quite some time, thinking he was nearing the end. Wasn't that a joy? Diana, whether you believe it or not, I love you. At this moment, I love you. I rolled my eyes. Your love really disgusts me. And he passed out. It was not worth it. I was about to taunt him a bit, but who knew he was so fragile? Just as I was about to leave, I saw Uncle Jason holding a woman in her 30s lying on the couch. A 7 or 8-year-old child was playing with toys on the other side. Seeing me, they were a bit shocked and quickly straightened their clothes. Diana, you're here to see Jason? Yes. Uncle Jason brought the little boy over. Diana, this is my son, Simon. He was speaking people language. Why couldn't I understand it? But the woman next to him, sensing my confusion, said, You must be Diana. I often hear Uncle Jason talk about you. From now on, come and play at our house often. Okay. It turned out that Uncle Jason had been keeping a mistress for these years, and even had a son this big. Jason died in less than a month. 3 days after his death, Uncle Jason married that woman. I never visited Jason's old home again. Jack had his own company now, so he gave the old house to Uncle Jason. 2 years later, I married Jack. He pulled out an album, and I noticed that in every photo of him, I was there. He lightly kissed the corner of my lips and said, "Because of you, I fell in love with taking selfies." 1. The second year after I married Jason, I got kidnapped. All the kidnappers wanted was money, and Jason had plenty of it. But he didn't answer the phone. Because the love of his life only had 6 months left, and he took her to Antarctica as he had once promised. I was tortured for 3 months, covered in wounds, and lost the child growing inside me. When he got back, he looked at the pregnancy test in the drawer and excitedly asked, "You were pregnant?" I calmly replied, "Not anymore." I was found in a foul-smelling ditch. The kidnappers thought they had beaten me to death and casually threw me there. A kind farmer lady found me and took me in. 3 days later, I started to regain consciousness. The lady's eyes sparkled with joy. But I couldn't even hold the bowl of porridge she brought. All my fingers were broken. At that moment, I felt heartbroken about one thing: would never play the piano again. I lost the only skill that had ever made Jason interested in me. Just then, the lady's phone pushed a piece of entertainment news. Recently, the famous woman Lucy had finally recovered and returned home. The lady wanted to cheer me up and pushed the screen toward me. "Girl, look at something happy. The news says she's just recovered, so you can recover too. Look, she's quite pretty, and the guy next to her really cherishes her." I followed her gaze. On the screen, closely guarding Lucy, was my husband, Jason. I forced out a smile. "Yeah, they make a great couple. And what about me? Now, I can't even move and will definitely end up with hideous scars all over my body. A long mark from a chain whip on my abdomen. Jason, I haven't had a chance to tell you, we had a baby. But Lucy's life was more precious than our baby's, right?" Suddenly, the shabby wooden door swung open. A familiar voice called, "Diana." I turned around. It was Jack. He stood at the low door, like a ray of light. Jack, Jason's uncle, was the first to find me. Without a word, he carried me to the car. When he saw the deep wounds on my wrist, his fingers trembled slightly. "Don't be afraid, I'm here. I'll take you to the hospital." My nose tingled with tears that wouldn't come. I had cried too much over the past few months. My tears had dried up. After an examination, the doctor called for a serious consultation. I had 4 fractures on my right arm and leg and shattered finger bones. Delayed treatment made my condition weak, and I couldn't undergo surgery right away. The recovery would be extremely painful. My internal organs had bled and my uterus was severely infected. Jack's voice was a bit hoarse. He looked down at me, his voice shaking. "What have you been through?" "What have I been through?" It was like hell. He took a deep breath and asked, "Does Jason know?" I shook my head. There was pity in Jack's eyes. Yes, my husband didn't know that his pregnant wife had been kidnapped for 3 months. He had cut off all contact with the outside world, just to accompany his first love. His devotion was touching even to countless netizens, let alone me, who had grown up with him. Jack brought in a nurse for me and quietly left. The next day, I stared blankly out the window at the birds flying by. Maybe I should never have clung to Jason. A familiar voice broke my thoughts. "Diana, why are you here?" I turned to see Jason, holding Lucy affectionately. 6 months had passed, and Lucy looked radiant. The terminal illness she had once cried to Jason about miraculously cured. She not only showed no signs of illness but looked brighter than ever before. Seeing me in a wheelchair, Jason frowned and asked, "What happened to you? Are you hurt?" The nurse was about to speak, but I stopped her. "No, just a minor surgery, recovery period." Jason quickly walked over and squatted in front of me. I pulled up my collar and tucked my hands into my sleeves, hiding the scars. He frowned. "What surgery? Why didn't you tell me?" "Tell you? How could I?" During those 3 months of captivity, I had wished every day that someone would answer the kidnappers' calls. That Jason would come with the money and rescue me. But he never did, not once. Hearing the mechanical voicemail tone infuriated the kidnappers every time they took out their anger on me, breaking a finger every day and pouring salt over the wounds. Back then, for Jason's child in my belly, I endured kneeling on the cold floor for hours, begging like a beggar for a bit of stale bread. The kidnappers initially thought they'd hit the jackpot, but I turned out to be useless. "You're worthless garbage." 6 months pregnant and missing so long, my husband didn't even care. "Aren't you a damn fool? Not just a fool, but you even want to bring a child into this world to suffer like you. If it were me, I would have killed myself long ago. Hey man, if she dies, how do we get our money?" The kidnapper kicked the guy next to him. "Look at this worthless thing, eating our food every day." Before he finished, he glared at me viciously. "Forget it, let's just kill her. It's a waste of time." The sound of the iron stick striking flesh, the grinding of chains, the thick smell of blood, and iron filled my mouth as my vision blurred. I felt the child leaving me. I had no strength left. Because my own life was slipping away too. I could do nothing. Near death, I thought, if only I had gone with my parents. Why didn't they take me with them? I had lived in Jason's house all these years, suffering daily humiliation from his mother. Because of that marriage contract, I became the person she despised the most. Jason interrupted my thoughts, impatience creeping into his voice. "Diana, tell me the truth, what's going on?" I shook my head lightly and forced a smile. "Really, it's nothing. You don't have to worry about me. Go take care of Lucy. I'll head back to my room." Though he frowned, Jason believed me. After all, if you don't truly care, even faking empathy isn't worth the effort. I started pushing my wheelchair to return to my room. "Wait." Jason called out to me, "Hey, let's talk." What am I afraid of now? The company's decided to give the piano recital to Lucy first. You'll wait until next year, okay? Without turning around, I softly said, "Okay." "Jason, I'll never be able to perform again, never play the piano again." I went back to my room, looking down at my hands. I remembered my parents talking about sitting in the audience, telling everyone, "That's our daughter, our precious little princess," once I had my recital. But it's all gone now. The phone rang, and the caller ID made me uneasy. It was the hospital where I had my prenatal checkups. I answered. The doctor sounded angry. "How long has it been since your prenatal exam date? You haven't come once. Even if you don't care about yourself, you should care about the baby. Do you know how hard it was for you to get pregnant?" "I'm sorry." My voice was hoarse, tears welling up. I looked up. "The baby is gone." "Sorry." The other end was silent for a long time before they also said, "I'm sorry." I couldn't hold back anymore and started sobbing on the phone. After hanging up, I heard nurses talking about Jason and Lucy. Their words were full of admiration and blessings. True love finally together, it is indeed something to be happy about. I stupidly smiled along with them. A few months later, I was discharged from the hospital. Jason's father came to pick me up. "Diana, you've been through so much. Why didn't you tell us you were sick?" Jason sneered. "Isn't that just like her? Keeping everything in, always playing the martyr." I just forced a smile and didn't say anything. "Jason, where were you when I needed you the most?" I was brought back to the mansion. Honestly, I didn't want to come back. But some things had to be resolved here. The heavy wooden doors of the living room creaked as Jason walked in, without helping me. Instantly, my mind went back to 3 months ago, to that dark and damp cellar. That small, narrow iron door that they banged on with iron rods, like cats toying with a mouse. Every time they came to torment me in the darkness, every sound and fear were magnified. Their laughter grew more arrogant whenever they heard my screams. The pain of the memories kept flooding my mind. Until Jason's sudden gentle voice interrupted me. He said softly, "You're here." That tone, it wasn't for me. I looked up. Jason's mother was holding Lucy's hand, chatting. She rolled her eyes at me when she saw me return and continued talking. Lucy immediately got up and walked over, her face full of pity, yet her eyes smiling. She took my hand. Diana, Jason was worried about me traveling alone abroad, so he insisted on coming along. Sorry he missed your surgery. You're not mad, are you? Before I could say anything, Jason chimed in, of course not. Diana's very understanding. I chuckled silently. An understanding person doesn't have the right to be angry. Sitting in a corner, Jack suddenly spoke up. His face was cold. Miss Lucy, now that you're well, you're chatty too. Lucy's face stiffened, but she dared not say anything. Jack held the foundational industries of Jason's family. She wouldn't dare argue with him. Jason awkwardly said, Lucy is just a bit willful. Jack didn't look at him, only said flatly, willfulness has its place. This is Jason's house, not hers. Jason's family fell silent. Lucy nudged Jason with her elbow. He quickly changed the subject. Diana, how about you stay in the guest room on the 3rd floor? Your old room is Lucy's now. He patiently explained, Lucy has just recovered. The doctor said she needs to stay there. Okay. I didn't wait for him to finish and dragged my small suitcase to the guest room on the 3rd floor. Jason stood there watching me until I got into the elevator. That night, I went to find Jack. Jack, I want to divorce Jason. Jack was only 4 years older than me but the head of the household now. He was the best one to ask. No one would dare not listen to him. As long as he agreed, I could divorce smoothly. On top of that, he never really liked me as a sister-in-law. He was always indifferent to me. When I was kidnapped, I had told the kidnappers to call Jack. But they never got the money, which meant Jack refused their demands. He's a good businessman. And I held no value. But this was precisely what I could use to convince him. Jason's and my marriage was arranged by our grandfathers. I knew from an early age that I would marry Jason someday. When I was a freshman in high school, my parents died in a car accident, and I was brought to Jason's house early. When Jason's grandfather was alive, everyone treated me well. When he died, everything changed overnight. After all, the only one who had dealt with my family was him. Orphaned and destitute, I had no one to rely on. After hearing my request, Jack slowly nodded. Fine, I'll take care of it. Was it that easy? I really am worthless. He found a stack of documents from a drawer. These are the investments I've made for you, using the money your parents left you all these years. My living expenses were all covered by Jack. No wonder he always said I didn't owe him. My eyes felt a bit warm. Thank you. As I took the documents and card out, I saw Jason at the door. What did you say to Jack? I sighed, looking at him earnestly. Jason, let's get a divorce. What? Jason didn't expect I would ask for a divorce. After all, he was the one I vowed to marry ever since I was a child. That had never changed. Since I met him, I insisted on sitting next to him, even when he spilled hot milk on me. I didn't give up. When he pushed me down the stairs when I confessed, I didn't give up. In high school, when he told a girl he liked that I was just a sister to him, I didn't give up. When his eyes could only see Lucy, I didn't give up. I loved him for so many years, but now, I'm the one asking for a divorce. He sneered, just because I gave Lucy your room? Or because I arranged the recital for her? Can't you stop being so needy? I used to be like that, but now, I'm really tired. Hearing his harsh words, I had no strength to argue back. Jason, this is how you push me away, step by step. Your room. Her concert. These words didn't bother him at all. We've been married for 2 years, and we still sleep in separate rooms. He never admitted I was his wife. Rumor has it, he and the celebrity Lucy are a perfect match, while I'm a shameless third party. It's funny, if the kidnappers had taken Lucy, they might have gotten the money. Sorry, I can't love you anymore. I didn't want to explain to him. I just calmly told him my plan. I don't need the property. I won't take anything from home. We just need to register the divorce. Let me know when you have time. Jason suddenly got furious. He gripped my wrist tightly, his eyes fierce. Dream on. The force made me cough violently. Every bone in my body was held together with steel pins with every cough. I could almost hear the metal hitting each other. I tried to calm my breath to stop coughing. Jason was taken aback seeing me like this. He picked me up and rushed toward the bedroom. I was in so much pain that I didn't dare to resist. Upon entering the bedroom, it was pitch dark since the lights were off. Fear took over my nerves again, and every muscle in my body trembled. The feeling of those iron rods hitting my stomach. The blood flowing from my lower abdomen. It was like an electric shock to my nerves. Before I knew it, my body curled up and my hands clasped together in Jason's arms. In a tearful and desperate tone, I kept pleading, "Please. Don't hit my stomach." Jason stared at me blankly. "What are you talking about?" My voice was hoarse and trembling. "Hit me, but don't hit my stomach." Jason gently laid me on the bed and turned on the light with a click. He gently stroked my back to soothe me. "Diana, what's wrong?" "Diana? Are you afraid of the dark?" The light stung my eyes, and I realized then I wasn't in that smelly, filthy cellar anymore. I was held there, doing everything in a space of about 3 square meters. 2 months, I lived like that for 2 months. That smell, even after all this time, still haunts me. I'm filthy, I'm dirty, I have no dignity. Are you hiding something from me? Jason's gaze was piercing as he looked at me. A moment later, I understood what he meant. There was a torn-up pregnancy exam report on the bedroom table, now pieced together. His eyes were filled with hope. "Why didn't you tell me we were having a baby? You went to the hospital to protect our child, right?" "Diana, I admit it, I wasn't good to you before. Now I get it. You did it for me, for our family. Can't I start treating you well now? Don't make a fuss, don't get a divorce, for our child." Listening to Jason's confession, I stared blankly ahead. Tears fell unknowingly. I've waited so long for these words, why are they coming so late? "A heart frozen can't be warmed," I said coldly. "There's no child anymore." This sentence quickly erased Jason's patience. He growled softly, "Diana, what are you up to?" I looked up and smiled, "Nothing. I've been hurt, but I know, you won't feel the pain." Jason didn't know the baby was gone, faint joy still reflecting in his eyes. Turns out, he was really happy about the baby. I thought he only cared about Lucy's child. He took a deep breath and hurried out, trying to ignore my coldness. He came back holding a few pieces of baby clothes. There were pink ones, blue ones, and even a tiny gold and jade lock. I bought those the moment I knew I was pregnant. My eyes filled with moisture. Not because of Jason's change, but because I was the most careless mother in the world. It had been 3 months before I noticed my baby's presence. Luckily, he didn't come into this world, didn't choose me to be his mom. I wouldn't have taken good care of him. Jason placed the baby clothes in my hand, small and soft. "Diana, believe me." I caressed the little clothes. I chose these carefully, they wouldn't hurt the baby's skin. There are many toys in my room too, since he's my first child. I have no experience taking care of a baby. I didn't know when he would play with those toys or when he would call me mom. I looked forward to it, hoping to give him the most love in the world. But now, suddenly, I slapped myself. Jason froze. "What are you doing?" I slapped myself again. My throat seemed to be stuck with something I couldn't swallow down. I couldn't cry. I just stared blankly at the tiny clothes, hitting myself so hard it hurt, to ease the sadness. "I'm not a good mom." Jason panicked. He threw the clothes aside and tightly gripped my hands. "Diana. I know you're mad at me. It won't ever happen again. I swear it won't." Jason sat next to me, holding me, gently stroking my hair, constantly comforting me. "What will it take for you to trust me?" "I swear, I promise, I'll kneel if I have to, okay?" It's too late. I looked at the wallpaper behind him. Turns out, it was this room. I intended to turn it into the nursery because it was closest to my room. "Jason." I gently pushed him away and looked into his eyes. It's too late. No, it's not. I stared straight into his eyes. The baby, he's gone. Jason stuttered, what? Don't say that, I just heard this great news. Before he could finish, I laughed bitterly and asked him, do you know how he was lost? Jason looked at me in disbelief and shook his head. Madly, I laughed, Jason, remember this, he was scraped off alive. Jason, when he fell out of my belly, he was red, sticky. He surrounded me, he warmed me. He was the only person in that stinky place who gave me warmth. He's not even a person. He's small, warm, and you didn't see him. He's so cute. I said it while laughing while tears streamed down my face. He looked at me, his mouth twitching involuntarily, trying hard to understand what I was saying. Then, with a trembling voice, he asked, what nonsense are you talking about? Did you have the baby aborted? I didn't want to laugh, but his expression was just too funny. Fear, terror, disbelief. After knowing him for so many years, I had never seen so many expressions on his face at once. Wait, I had seen it once. On the day Lucy was forcibly sent abroad by Jason's mother, Jason's expressions were even richer than now. I pointed at the pregnancy test report in his hand and patiently explained, sorry, I tore off the date. This is from before. His hand trembled, and it seemed he understood what I meant. Jason, I was kidnapped, did you know that? His eyes widened instantly, what? Did your family not tell you I hadn't been home for 3 months? He shook his head slowly, no, no one told me. It must have been Jason's mother who did this on purpose. She wanted Jason and me to have conflicts and then get a divorce. Now, as she wished, it has happened. Jason's face darkened, and as I was about to leave, he pulled me into his arms. I'm sorry, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I've always felt that as long as Jason turned around and looked at me, I could unconditionally forgive him for years of indifference and neglect towards me. He didn't even need to say sorry. But tonight, despite him saying sorry repeatedly, my hatred for him didn't lessen at all. No need to apologize, just divorce me and let me go, can you do that? He looked at me, his eyes red. In his eyes, I saw myself smiling at this moment. Such a fake smile, such a hypocritical smile. No, Diana, I won't divorce you. I want to make it up to you, give me a chance to make it up to you, okay? See, that kind of smile can't fool Jason. Then I don't need to smile anymore. I coldly looked at him, you mean making it up to me by keeping me by your side against my will? No, I interrupted his argument directly. Do you think you'll instantly fall out of love and marry Lucy right after our divorce, so you won't let me go? He looked incredulous. How is that possible? I just want to love you well, I snorted coldly, lies. Can't you still be good to me if we're divorced? Are you guilty towards Diana or your wife? He blinked, not understanding what I meant. After a long pause, he firmly refused my proposal for divorce. I can't divorce you. I know once you leave here, you'll never come back. I was held captive in Jason's house, with several maids watching me all the time. These days, Jason always slept on the floor of my room, trying to look like a good man. Only one night did he not come back. But he never asked about the details of the kidnapping. So fake. If he truly wanted to be good to me, shouldn't he have found those who hurt me? I gently opened the door, took only the contract and card Jack had given me, along with some documents, not even daring to wear shoes. The maids were all asleep. I quietly opened the front door, and bitter cold wind rushed down my neck. I didn't care about anything, just ran as fast as I could. I kept running until my throat hurt, my lungs hurt, my head hurt, but I didn't dare stop. Until a beam of light hit me, giving me a fright, I panic ran into the nearby bushes. I was scared. I didn't want to go back to that home again. I wanted my own life. That place was never my home. Diana, stop running, it's dangerous. I heard a familiar voice, turned rigidly, and saw Jack standing there. Seeing me stop, he dared to jog over. Don't worry, it's me. He bent down and lifted me horizontally. Jack, "Why are you back now?" He didn't speak, but put me in the car and turned on the light to check my feet. Only then did I feel the pain. With many thorns in my feet, he took out a bottle of water and carefully washed my wounds. Little by little, meticulously. After washing, he applied medicine to them with patience and care. I had never been in such close contact with him, daring not to move at all. After all this, he straightened up. "My assistant told me you hadn't left the house, so I knew something must have happened." He then explained, his voice much softer, "I was on a business trip these days. Why didn't you tell me you were being held at home?" For a moment, I didn't know how to respond. I wasn't familiar with him after all. Not making it hard for me, Jack drove all the way down the mountain. Then carried me into an apartment complex. "I have an apartment here, I had it cleaned up, you can stay here." Stay in his apartment? Seeing my hesitation, he added, "I don't live here. Due to my injuries, there were many things I couldn't eat." The housekeepers Jack hired were paid well but left after a few days, saying I was hard to serve. Seeing me sit on the couch feeling wronged, Jack brought over a few dishes. "Try what I cooked." Cooking really didn't seem like Jack, but his food was indeed pretty good. Seeing me eat happily, he ruffled my hair. "Then I'll come over every day to cook for you?" I nodded. I wasn't even sure why I agreed, but having him around made me feel much more at ease. The next morning, Jack pressed the doorbell. He had been doing that these days. Even though he knew the password, he always rang the bell first and only entered with my permission. As soon as I opened the door, a big fluffy creature squeezed in. Scared me enough to jump back. It was Jack's German Shepherd. It followed Jack for 5 or 6 years. I remembered it's named Pluto. "Why did you bring him here?" He made Pluto sit and then said, "To accompany you, and to give you something to do." I didn't understand. "You're eating my food, you'll at least walk the dog for Meso." Pluto was temporarily staying at my place. Maybe it was the extra exercise from walking the dog, or seeing such a mighty dog lying by my bed gave me a strong sense of security. That night, I slept very soundly. I didn't even hear Jack's doorbell. When he shook me awake, we both got startled. "You almost gave me a heart attack." I rang the doorbell for ages, but no one answered. So, I just came in. I rubbed my eyes. This was the first good night's sleep I'd had since getting back from hell. Pluto seemed to know it was thanks to him. He wriggled between us, his eyes sparkling adorably. After making dinner, Jack was about to leave. On a whim, just as he was about to step out, I grabbed his sleeve. He looked at me, puzzled. I cleared my throat. It had come to this, so I had to say it. "How about you move in?" He seemed stunned. "What did you just say?" I cleared my throat again and repeated, "Move in. It's really tiring to run back and forth every day." Jack didn't agree right away. He just said it wasn't the right time. My face flushed. I quickly let go of his sleeve and ran into the bedroom. That night, when Jack came over, I deliberately took my time opening the door. But he didn't seem upset. He pulled a document out of his bag and handed it to me. It was a divorce agreement. "I'll make dinner. Take a close look at it." Without thinking much, I sat down on the sofa and started reading. The agreement said I would get 3% of Jason Corporation's shares after the divorce, which was half of Jason's shares. All the post-marriage deposits and properties under Jason's name would also be split. This wasn't Jason's doing. His mother would never agree to it. There's no way Jason would go against his mom. Otherwise, she wouldn't have sent Lucy away so easily. Jason didn't even utter a word in protest back then. I looked towards the kitchen, holding the agreement. He glanced at me. "This is the first draft. If there's anything you need, tell me and I'll have the lawyer added in." Tears welled up in my eyes. "Is this your idea?" He pursed his lips, a slight smile forming. He shook his head gently. "It's not." Did Jason really grow a conscience? But then he added, "It's what the marriage law mandates. If the law says you get money, why not take it?" Back then, I just wanted to leave Jason's house. I was afraid requesting anything might drag out the divorce process. I didn't want to wait. I just wanted to be rid of Jason as soon as possible. Don't worry, I'm here. I nodded, not saying another word. The next day, I was ready to register the divorce. Jack wanted to come along, but his presence wasn't exactly suitable. Clearly, some people didn't understand this. Lucy stood with a victorious look, announcing her win. We stood in a long line, waiting to get our divorce certificate. Diana, do you really want a divorce? You once said you'd forgive me no matter what. Were you lying? Jason asked me, looking pained. How dare he ask me that? Does he even deserve my forgiveness? He was at a loss for words. Finally, it was our turn. Just as we were about to sign, Jason suddenly said, Diana, you're right. Even if we divorce, I can still treat you well. I'll pursue you all over again. My heart turned cold. I lowered my head, hiding a cold smile. A prodigal son returning home means nothing to me. I quickly signed my name. The moment I got the divorce certificate, I felt a huge weight lift off me. Walking out, Lucy approached me. You really got divorced? Diana, you'll regret leaving such a good man like Jason. I looked at her, smirking. Seems like you already regret it. You're still stuck being the mistress. Diana, Jason called out, don't be so harsh. Lucy never crossed any lines. Jason, do you even know what boundaries mean? I retorted, not looking back as I walked away. At that moment, even yelling at them felt beneath me. That night, Jack moved in. I finally mustered the courage to ask him, back then, when those kidnappers called you, why did you hang up? Jack looked baffled. What call? Didn't Jack know? But I clearly remembered the kidnappers saying they called everyone in my contact list. They all hung up when they heard the ransom amount, without exception. Jack had been my only hope besides Jason. But when I heard what the kidnappers said, I realized I was abandoned by everyone. Just like the kidnappers said, I was a complete failure. But Jack insisted he never got a call. He furrowed his brow. Sister-in-law said you went out of town because you were upset about Jason and Lucy going abroad, but I knew you wouldn't leave for no reason, especially with the piano competition coming up. So I started looking for you. He held my hand. I'm sorry. It took me too long to realize. I looked into Jack's eyes. They were clear and sincere, not deceitful. What's really going on? I needed to find those kidnappers to understand. Since that day, my life had been calm and fulfilling every day. I walked the dog, attended language classes, then waited for Jack to come home and have dinner together. With the settlement from the divorce, I finally had the means to investigate the kidnapping. Jack said he'd been investigating, too, and had some leads. That day, after I packed up, I was ready to pick Jack up from work. Opening the door, I was met by a face I despised. How did Lucy manage to wander around without getting caught? I had to give it to her. Diana, how's life? Great. She wanted to come in, but stopped when she saw Pluto. I came to tell you, you'd better move. Jason has found you. I scoffed. I thought you were already Jason's wife. Guess you're still stuck playing lover. She looked like a cat that had its tail stepped on. Angry, she glared at me, her beautiful facade breaking. What do you know? Jason will marry me soon. With Jason's mom's support, he'll definitely marry me. I nodded. Jane looked down on me. So now she'll accept you? What makes you think you're any different from when you were kicked out? She extended her hand, showing a sapphire ring. I get it now. You're a star now. Do you think Jason's family needs the little money you make from acting? Not even me, with just a 3% stake, looked at it. You. She took 2 steps closer, but backed off when she saw Pluto barking madly at her. I thought this verbal battle was over, but then she started laughing lowly, her eyes filled with hatred. Diana, you think you're so high and mighty? How's that stale bread taste? How does it feel to do everything in one tiny space? I felt like I was hit by a spell, standing there frozen. Those memories, the ones I thought I'd slowly forgotten, came rushing back. I hadn't forgotten. The fear was even clearer now. Diana, you deserve to lose a child, it's all on you. You should be the one dead, but you're still alive. How does she know these things? Only the police and Jack knew what I'd gone through, and I hadn't told anyone else. Not only did she know, she knew in detail. Why? Did she hire those people? It's the only explanation. No wonder Jack said he never got a call from the kidnappers. They never even made a call, it was all just a show. It was a game to watch my hopes rise and be crushed. No one got a call. No one received my desperate plea for help. I lost control and rushed at Lucy, grabbing for her collar. But she just smirked, leaned back, and fell down the stairs, yelling, "Diana." Jason stepped out of the elevator just then, seeing Lucy tumbling down. He rushed over, pushed me aside, and picked her up. Lucy nestled into Jason's arms, grinning at me with triumph. I was shaking all over. For Jason, she killed my child and made me suffer inhuman torment for 3 months. Why? Jason glared at me with blame and disappointment. "Diana, you've let me down." I was about to speak when a warm hand wrapped around my waist. Jack stood beside me, looking down at the two on the floor with disdain. "Do you think she cares what you think of her?" Jason had always feared Jack deeply, but seeing Jack's hand on my waist, he suddenly burst into anger. "You two. Are you living together now?" I took Jack's arm. "What's it to you?" Jason laughed bitterly. "Oh, I see. That's why you suddenly wanted a divorce. You found someone better." I nodded. "He is better in every way." Lucy tugged at Jason's collar. "Jason, I'm in pain." Jason said nothing, just walked away with Lucy in his arms. After they left, Jack leaned in close. "Do you really think that?" He bent down to look me in the eyes. "Am I better than him in everything?" I nodded firmly. "Of course, you're more handsome, more capable, and love me more." He suddenly kissed me, silencing my words. The room went quiet, even Pluto sensibly went out onto the balcony. His kiss made me breathless, my head dizzy. Not until he carried me to the bed did I realize what was happening. "Have you thought it through?" He whispered huskily, kissing my earlobe. Thought it through? The next morning, I woke up to find Jack making breakfast. I quietly went over and hugged his waist. "Awake?" After breakfast. Jack received a call, looking serious. From his eyes, I could tell it was about me. Before he could say anything, a friend told me Lucy had claimed I pushed her down the stairs, even revealing my current location. Reporters were swarming downstairs. I peeked through the curtains. Sure enough, there were many reporters. Online, people were cursing me endlessly. "She's just an ex-wife. What right does she have to hit someone?" If she hadn't interfered, Lucy would have been Jason's wife by now. Jack called the property management, asking them to get rid of the reporters. Eventually, the police were called, and the reporters were driven away. "Don't be afraid. I'm here." I didn't want to keep avoiding it. I told Jack the kidnappers might have been hired by Lucy. He wasn't surprised. He must have already known. "Look at this." He showed me some photos. One was of an older man, Lucy's uncle. She grew up in her uncle's house. Another was her cousin, who had been jailed for robbery a few years back and recently released. The following photos made my blood run cold. These 4 men were the ones who kidnapped me. Would I ever forget their faces? Never. "Are you sure?" he asked. "Sure." On the 3rd day of the media frenzy, the police announced that Lucy was suspected of kidnapping and extortion and had been arrested. I didn't need to explain anything. People now understood what kidnapping was, who had been kidnapped, and what the victim had suffered. Surprisingly, I saw Jason downstairs. Seeing me, he rushed over, looking ready to cry. "Diana, I'm sorry. I didn't know you went through all that." I turned away, not wanting to look at him. "Apart from losing the child, my suffering had nothing to do with you." His face turned pale, but I felt a cruel satisfaction, you know. I stared at him closely, not wanting to miss any of his expressions, and continued, "When that child passed away, it had already been 3 months. Just a little more, just a little bit, and he could have survived. Jason staggered back a few steps, barely steadying himself by holding onto a nearby tree. If that child knew that when he died, his biological father was out there watching the aurora with his ex-girlfriend, he'd resent you for sure. Jason closed his eyes, unable to listen any further. I was covered in wounds. Is there anything worse than this? And all of this is because of you, Jason. You were unfaithful. If you loved Lucy, you shouldn't have married me. I had already proposed to break off the engagement, and your father had agreed. I was ready to leave that house, but you crawled into my bed while I was delirious with a high fever. After that, you hypocritically said you'll take responsibility, that you'd forget Lucy, and treat me well for life, but everything changed after we got married. You said I was just a tool for you to get back at your father. Jason, you ruined my life. You want me to forgive you? I'm telling you, unless you die. People die every day in this world. Why don't you die, Jason? Suddenly, Jason lifted his head, blood streaming from his nose. But he seemed unfazed, skillfully taking out a cotton ball to stop the bleeding. I don't have time to waste here, so I took Pluto upstairs. In the evening, Jack came back, his face grim. What happened? He took my hand and pulled me into his embrace. I found out who the real culprit behind your kidnapping is. Who? I asked. He said the person behind it was Jason's mom. I want to hear your opinion. I straightened up and looked at him. Are you going to persuade me not to press charges? Jack stared at me and suddenly pinched my nose with a smile. Is that what you think of me? I quickly shook my head. No, I'm saying, if we press charges against her, would it affect the company? He looked at me helplessly but with a hint of amusement. At a time like this, you're still thinking about the company? I pouted and muttered, after all, I do have shares now. Jack chuckled, then turned serious. I'm afraid you'll be swayed by my brother's kindness towards you. My assistant is downstairs right now. If you decide to press charges, he'll immediately take us to the police to report it. I thought about it. While Jason's father had been kind to me, I could find other ways to compensate him. I wouldn't let myself live in pain and regret. I want to report it. She needs to pay the price. Jane was arrested in the middle of the night. The people who kidnapped me were all captured within 2 days, including Lucy's uncle and cousin. Jane cursed me non-stop, calling me an ungrateful traitor, but who cares? I wished she were dead. I thought Jason's father would try to persuade me, but he surprisingly supported my decision. However, there was one piece of news that shocked me. Jason was hospitalized, and I heard he was very sick. A few months later, the entire case was thoroughly investigated. Jane received a life sentence. Lucy was sentenced to 15 years, and all her property was confiscated. Because of her crime, the dramas she acted in couldn't be aired, and the production companies demanded compensation. Even her endorsements pursued legal action against her. Even after she gets out, she'll spend her life paying off debts. As for the 4 people who kidnapped me, they got life sentences, 15 years, 13 years, and 10 years respectively. Lucy's uncle got 5 years, and her cousin, who was on parole, got 10 years. When I went to see Jason, he was already in bad shape. Instead of getting treatment in a hospital, he went home. I finally understood why he was so happy when he found out I was pregnant. He knew about his illness early on and thought having a child would make him happy, right? Diana, whether you believe it or not, I love you. At this moment, I love you. I rolled my eyes. Your love makes me sick. He passed out. What a bummer. I was going to mock him, but who knew he'd be so fragile? As I went downstairs, I saw Jason's father lying on the couch with a woman in her 30s. A 7 or 8-year-old kid was playing with toys on the side. Seeing me, they quickly adjusted their clothes. Diana, you're here to see Jason? Jason's father pulled the little boy over. Diana, this is my younger son, Simon. He was speaking plainly, but it made no sense to me. The woman next to him noticed my confusion and said, You must be Diana. Jason's father talks about you often. Do come and visit us more. Okay. So, Jason's father had been keeping a mistress, who even had an illegitimate child. This big Jason died within a month. 3 days after his death, his father married that woman. I never went back to that place. Jack got the company, and the villa was left to Jason's father. 2 years later, Jack and I got married. He took out some photo albums, and I realized every picture had me in it. He kissed my lips softly. Because of you, I fell in love with taking selfies.